Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear.
He is of another time and place, buried on a hillside in Arlington, Virginia, for more than 47 years. 7 out of 10 Americans were not even born when he took the oath of office 50 years ago.
And will, to the best of my ability,
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
preserve, protect, and defend.
But if you are old enough to
the
remember,
United States.
you can stand at the Capitol's East Front and the images flood back across half a century. The images in brilliant black and white that fill tens of millions of television screens.
We observe today not a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom.
He had come to the presidency as the child of wealth and privilege, as a World War II hero who had almost lost his life, as the winner of the closest of elections, one whose validity was doubted by many.
The next time John F. Kennedy goes through that door, he will be the President of the United States.
Historian Thurston Clark.
And also the first Catholic president. Not just the youngest elected, but also the first Catholic, and also elected by the slimmest vote majority in the popular vote. And so that's another reason that he had to give a speech for the ages, a speech that would unite the country.
Kennedy would be speaking as well to the millions of his generation who had come home from the war, tasted post-war prosperity, raised their baby boomer children, worried under the shadow of a Cold War and a nuclear threat, and watched as one of their own took the presidency.
I remember thinking, I didn't know you could be a president of the United States and not have gray hair.
Columnist, author, and former Reagan speechwriter Peggy Noonan was a 10-year-old girl on New York's Long Island.
You know, these new people who came in, they had dark hair, like sort of relatively young people, like parents, not like grandparents. I didn't know. I thought you had to have gray hair. I thought it was in the Constitution.
And it was not just youth, but glamour after 15 years of the Midwest plain-spoken Harry Truman and then Dwight Eisenhower. Jacqueline Kennedy was not just impossibly young, a 31-year-old First Lady, but strikingly attractive. And there was glamour of another sort, an inaugural gala hosted by Frank Sinatra, with many of the brightest stars of the stage and the screen.
And you had all of the celebrities in Washington. You had a feeling that this was a gathering of the best and the brightest in the country.
On Inauguration Day, John Kennedy took the oath of office, bathed in brilliant winter light.
It had snowed 8 inches overnight, but Inauguration Day itself was very cold, but it was very bright. The sun was out, and it was bouncing off all the snow. It was bouncing off those big white pillars, you know?
There was Robert Frost, blinded by the sun, unable to read the poem he'd written, reciting another from memory.
The land was ours before we were the land's. She was our land more than 100 years before we were her people.
Jacqueline, dressed in beige, a conscious decision to set her apart from the other older women draped in fur. But what is most remembered are the words.
Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike, that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans.
Longtime Kennedy speechwriter and advisor Ted Sorensen told CBS News back in 1999 that Kennedy had one goal in mind.
He wanted this speech to speak out and try to address those skeptics, to prove that he was up to the task.
Sorensen, who died a few months ago, was often given credit for the inaugural address. Thurston Clark disagrees.
I think you would find that John Kennedy contributed most of the passages and the famous words that we remember. The torch has been passed to a new generation, the ask not line, bear any burden, all of those were Kennedy. He dictated them. He had a Sorensen draft in front of him on January 10th. He flew to Palm Beach. He looked at the draft, and he dictated his changes and additions to the draft.
At the Kennedy Library in Boston, Director Tom Putnam showed us the display that includes pages from the steno pad of Kennedy's secretary.
Even in her shorthand, you can see she's written out the words long twilight struggle or the trumpet summons us again. Tyranny, disease, war itself. These are signature lines that we remember, and really this is the genesis of them on that flight down to Palm Beach.
Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden.
People remember this as a kind of Cold War speech because of the "we'll pay any price, bear any burden." But most of the rest of the speech was about peace and about negotiations and about the threat of nuclear war.
Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate.
Most memorable, of course, is the line that defined his central message.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
When Kennedy said, "Ask not," people knew that this was a man who'd been decorated in World War II, who'd almost lost his life trying to save the surviving crew members of PT-109. So it wasn't of this, of where does he get off saying, "Ask not"? He had the credentials to make this claim on people.
The instant acclaim for the speech and the images of youth and glamour that surrounded the inauguration set the stage for coverage of the new president and his family that lasted for almost all of his 1,000 days in office, especially in the mass magazines, Life and Look, that were still read by millions. But even now, with full knowledge of his reckless private life, why do Americans still rank John Kennedy the best of all post-war presidents?
I think what John Kennedy did is we compartmentalize things. There was so much that was accomplished, that was on its way to being accomplished. We put this in one compartment, and then we have in the other compartment is this terribly reckless sexual life.
But there is, of course, another reason, those other memories of another moment in Washington. The sudden end of the Kennedy presidency left behind a sense of what could have been. Is the legacy what happened or what we think could have happened had he not been killed?
I think it's what we thought could have happened, because in the last 100 days of his life, he was suddenly beginning to have the courage to do the things that were going to make him a great president. And one was the Civil Rights Bill, and the other was the Test Ban Treaty.
A journey of 1,000 miles must begin with a single step.
But the beginning of his presidency and what turned out to be the end of his presidency were both times when the American people hoped that this president was going to solve their problems and was going to become what he hoped to be, which was a great president.
All this will not be finished in the first 100 days.
This was a presidency interrupted. It didn't have enough time to impose real meaning. It had enough time to impose a mood and to impose an indelible memory.
Nor in the life of this administration, nor even perhaps in our lifetime on this planet. But let us begin.